In 1943, British intelligence came up with a plan so strange it sounded like madness. They would use a dead man to deceive Adolf Hitler. Not a spy, not a double agent, a corpse. They dressed the body as a Royal Marines officer, chained a briefcase of top-secret documents to his wrist, and released him into the sea, hoping the Nazis would find him first. If the Germans believed what was inside that briefcase, they would move entire armies to the wrong place. And when the Allies finally invaded Europe, thousands of soldiers would live because Hitler had been fooled by a man who never existed. But the real story is even stranger, because the most important weapon in this operation was a homeless man no one had ever heard of. April 30th, 1943. The waters off Huelva, Spain. A Spanish fisherman named José Antonio Rey Maria is hauling in his nets just after dawn. The catch has been poor. The war has made everything scarce, even the fish. But this morning, something else drifts into view. A shape, face down in the grey Atlantic swells. A body. Rey Maria crosses himself and pulls alongside. The corpse is a man, bloated but not yet unrecognisable. He wears the uniform of a British Royal Marines officer. The gold braid on his sleeves marks him as someone of rank. And there, secured to his wrist by a chain, hangs a black leather briefcase. The fisherman knows what he has found. Everyone in Huelva knows. This stretch of Spanish coast has become a graveyard for the war's debris. Allied planes crash into the sea. German submarines prowl the shipping lanes. Bodies wash ashore with terrible regularity. But this one is different. This one carries secrets. Rey Maria tows the corpse to shore and reports his discovery to the local authorities. Within hours, the body lies on a slab in the Huelva morgue. Spanish naval officers crowd around, examining the dead man's identification card. Major William Martin, Royal Marines, serial number 148228. The briefcase remains chained to his wrist. No one opens it. Not yet. But word travels fast in Huelva. This is 1943, and Spain is neutral in name only. General Franco owes his victory in the Civil War to Hitler and Mussolini. Spanish intelligence officers drink with their German counterparts. They share information like old friends sharing gossip. And the Germans have a man in Huelva. His name is Adolf Klaus. He runs the local Abwehr network, and he is very, very good at his job. Within hours of the body's discovery, Klaus knows about the briefcase. He knows a British officer is lying in the Spanish morgue with documents chained to his corpse, and he knows, with the certainty of a professional intelligence officer, that whatever is in that case could change the course of the war. The Germans are desperate. By the spring of '43, they have lost North Africa. Rommel's Africa Corps has surrendered. 300,000 Axis soldiers are now prisoners of war. The Allies control the Mediterranean southern shore, and everyone from Berlin to London knows what comes next. An invasion of Europe. The only question is where. Sicily is the obvious answer. It sits like a stepping stone between North Africa and the Italian mainland. Every German general with a map can see it. Every Allied planner knows the Germans can see it. The island is so logical a target that simply telling the truth would be disbelieved. So here lies Major William Martin, face up on a Spanish autopsy table, his secrets still locked in leather. The Spanish pathologist notes the cause of death as drowning. He estimates the body has been in the water for several days. Everything appears consistent with a plane crash at sea, a courier flight gone wrong, a tragic accident of war. But Adolf Klaus is not interested in tragedy. He is interested in that briefcase. He cables his superiors in Madrid. They cable Berlin. And in the halls of German intelligence, a single question begins to burn. What did the British lose? The answer, they believe, could reveal the entire Allied invasion plan, the location, the timing, The forces involved, if they can get their hands on those documents, they can position their defences perfectly. They can turn the Mediterranean into a killing ground. What Klaus doesn't know, what no one in Huelva or Madrid or Berlin suspects, is that they are being watched. Not by spies on the ground, but by listeners in England. The British have broken the German codes. They are reading Nazi communications almost in real time, and they already know that the bait has been taken. This was no ordinary casualty. This body was a meticulously crafted weapon aimed at the heart of the Third Reich. But to understand the weapon, you must first meet its architects, working from a basement bunker hundreds of miles away. To the German agents in Spain, the dead officer was a potential intelligence goldmine. To the men in London, he was their greatest creation. The story begins not at sea, but in the smoke-filled rooms where the war's darkest arts were practiced. Beneath the Admiralty building in London, there was a basement room that officially didn't exist. Room 13. The men who worked there called it that with a kind of grim humour. Superstition, after all, was for people who believed in luck. These men believed in something else entirely. They believed in the careful, methodical manufacture of lies. 2 officers ran Room 13. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague was a naval intelligence officer and peacetime barrister. Sharp, meticulous. The kind of man who could argue a case before a judge in the morning and plan a deception operation before lunch. His partner was Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley of the Royal Air Force. Cholmondeley was younger, more eccentric, possessed of the kind of imagination that military bureaucracies usually crush out of men by their 3rd year of service. Somehow, his had survived. Together, they made an unlikely pair, the lawyer and the dreamer. But in the shadow war of 1943, unlikely pairs were exactly what British intelligence needed. Their problem was Sicily. By early 1943, the Allies had swept Rommel's Afrika Korps out of North Africa. The Mediterranean belonged to the Royal Navy. The next step was obvious to everyone with a map: Sicily. The island sat like a stepping stone between Tunisia and the Italian mainland. Take Sicily, and you crack open the soft underbelly of Hitler's Europe. Every strategic analyst in London knew it. Every general in Berlin knew it too. The Germans had already begun reinforcing the island. Panzer divisions, coastal artillery, fighter squadrons. Sicily was the obvious target, and obviousness in war gets men killed by the tens of thousands. The Allies needed the Germans to look somewhere else, anywhere else: Greece, Sardinia, the Balkans. But how do you convince the enemy that the obvious target is actually a feint? How do you make the truth look like a lie? The answer came from a footnote. In 1939, a junior intelligence officer named Ian Fleming had written a memo. Fleming would later become famous for other reasons, for creating a fictional spy named James Bond. But in 1939, he was just another man in naval intelligence, jotting down ideas. One of those ideas was almost absurdly simple: plant a corpse carrying false documents where the enemy would find it. Let the dead deliver your lies. The memo sat in a file for 4 years. Then Cholmondeley found it. The idea was audacious. It was also, when you thought about it carefully, deeply ghoulish. But Montague and Cholmondeley weren't squeamish men. They couldn't afford to be. The invasion of Sicily was scheduled for July. Thousands of lives hung on whether the Germans reinforced the island or stripped it bare. If a corpse could save those lives, then a corpse they would find. The search began in January 1943. The criteria were specific and coldly pragmatic. They needed a body that would pass examination by Spanish doctors. More dangerously, it had to fool German intelligence analysts who might demand a second look. The corpse had to appear to have drowned at sea. This meant no obvious wounds, no signs of disease that would contradict the cover story. The cause of death Had to be something that would leave the lungs waterlogged and the tissues consistent with a man who had spent days floating in the Atlantic. They also needed someone who wouldn't be missed. Bentley Purchase was the coroner of the St. Pancras district in London. He knew death in all its varieties. When Montague approached him with the requirements, Purchase understood immediately. He began checking the morgues, the hospitals, the charity wards, looking for a man with no family, no connections, no one who would ask questions. He found Glyndwr Michael in a London hospital mortuary. Michael was a Welshman, 34 years old, homeless. He had died after ingesting rat poison, likely accidentally, possibly by his own hand. No one knew for certain, and frankly, no one in authority had cared enough to investigate. He had no family who came forward to claim him, no friends who inquired about his fate. In life, Glyndwr Michael had been invisible, the kind of man the world looks past without seeing, a drifter, a vagrant, a man who died alone in a city of millions. But his body was almost perfect for what Montague needed. Almost. There was a problem. Rat poison doesn't kill the way drowning does. A thorough autopsy would reveal the phosphorus in his system. Montague consulted with the pathologists. Their assessment was grimly reassuring. Spanish doctors would likely perform only a cursory examination. Catholic Spain didn't favour autopsies anyway, due to religious objections to cutting open the dead. And even if the Germans demanded more, the decomposition from weeks in seawater would obscure the chemical traces. It was a gamble. But the entire operation was a gamble. Montague made his decision. Glyndwr Michael, the man who had nothing in life, would become Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. He would carry secrets that would reshape the war. His death, meaningless and forgotten, would be given meaning after all. They had their vessel. But a body is just a prop. To fool the famously meticulous German intelligence machine, they had to give this corpse a life, a personality, a soul. The corpse in the London morgue was a blank slate. The task now was to write a life story on it so convincing it could change the course of the war. The body had a name now. Captain, Acting Major, William Martin of the Royal Marines. But a name is just ink on paper. To fool German intelligence, British officers needed to create something far more difficult. They needed to create a soul. The men running Operation Mincemeat understood something profound about human psychology. A German analyst would examine top-secret military documents with maximum suspicion. Every word would be scrutinized, every signature questioned. But that same analyst would unconsciously lower his guard when examining the embarrassing, mundane contents of a dead man's pockets, the private debris of an ordinary life. So they built that life, piece by piece, detail by detail. First, the wallet. Into it went a receipt from S. Lock Jewellers on Old Bond Street, £53 for an engagement ring, a considerable sum in 1943. The kind of purchase a man makes when he's serious about a woman. Then the bank letter. This was a small masterpiece of bureaucratic irritation. A stern note from Lloyd's Bank demanding immediate attention to an overdraft of £79, 19 shillings and 2 pence. The tone was exactly right, politely threatening. The kind of letter a young officer might shove in his pocket and try to forget about. They added ticket stubs from the Prince of Wales Theatre in London, a bill from the Naval and Military Club, a book of stamps, 2 letters from his father, written in the stiff, slightly disapproving tone of a provincial solicitor who wishes his son would visit more often. Every item was researched, every item was aged, creased at the folds, worn at the edges, the pocket litter of a real man living a real life. But the heart of the deception was Pam. Pam was a fiction, a woman who never existed, created to make a man who never lived feel absolutely real. British intelligence needed love letters. Not just any love letters. Letters that felt true. Letters with the specific emotional texture of a wartime romance, where every meeting might be the last. A clerk in the office named Jean Leslie agreed to have her photograph taken. That photograph, showing an attractive young woman with dark hair and a warm smile, became the face of Pam, the face that Major William Martin would carry next to his heart. The letters themselves were written with extraordinary care. They captured the breathless urgency of new love, mixed with the shadow of separation. Pam worried about Bill. She missed him desperately. She couldn't wait for the war to end, so they could finally be together. She signed her letters with a pet name and little declarations of devotion. One letter mentioned a minor argument they'd had. Another referenced an inside joke. Small imperfections. The kind of details that only exist in real relationships. The German analysts who eventually read these letters would find something they weren't expecting. Not military intelligence. Something far more persuasive. Evidence of a human being. A man who was loved. A man who had debts and dreams, and a woman waiting for him at home. The genius of it was this. The military documents in Major Martin's briefcase were the bait. But the love letters from Pam were the hook. They were designed to make a skeptical German intelligence officer feel something. Sympathy, perhaps. Recognition. The sense that this poor drowned courier was real in all the ways that matter. You can't fake a top-secret document convincingly enough to fool a professional. But you can fake a life convincingly enough to make that professional stop looking for the forgery. Major William Martin was becoming more real with every theatre ticket, every angry bank letter, every tender word from a woman named Pam. He had a father who loved him in a distant English way, a fiancée who adored him, a bank manager who was furious with him. He had texture, he had dimension, he had all the messy, contradictory details that make a person feel authentic. The character was written, the props were assembled, and the body was dressed for its final, leading role. Now came the most dangerous part, the delivery. A single mistake could expose the entire operation and get thousands of men killed. With a life story written and a body preserved, the mission entered its final, irreversible phase. They had to cast their line into enemy waters and pray the fish would bite. April 19th, 1943. The submarine HMS Seraph slipped out of Holy Loch, Scotland, carrying the strangest cargo in Royal Navy history. In the forward torpedo compartment sat a steel canister 6 feet long, labelled as meteorological equipment. The crew had been told it contained a secret weather device vital to the war effort. They were not to touch it. They were not to ask questions. Only the captain, Lieutenant Norman Jewell, knew the truth. Inside that canister, packed in dry ice, lay the body of Major William Martin. For 11 days, the Seraph made its way south through the Atlantic, around the coast of Portugal, toward the Spanish shoreline. 11 days with a corpse aboard. The crew ate their meals, played cards, slept in their bunks, and all the while, a dead man in a Royal Marines uniform waited in frozen silence just feet away. The operational security was absolute. Not a single sailor suspected what they were carrying. On the night of April 30th, the Seraph surfaced off the coast of Huelva, Spain. The location had been chosen with surgical precision. British intelligence knew that the local German Abwehr agent, a man named Adolf Klaus, was diligent, well-connected, and maintained excellent relations with Spanish military intelligence. Anything that washed ashore in Huelva would reach German hands within hours. At 4:30 in the morning, the crew hauled the canister to the deck. Lieutenant Jewell opened it for the first time. The dry ice had kept the body remarkably preserved. They inflated the corpse's life jacket, attached the briefcase to his belt with a chain, and gently lowered Major William Martin into the dark water. What happened next was not in any operational manual. As the body drifted away from the submarine, Joule ordered his officers to remove their caps. Someone recited the 39th Psalm. "Lord, let me know mine end, and the number of my days." It was a moment of unexpected solemnity. These men didn't know who the corpse had been in life. They didn't know his real name or how he died. But they understood they were committing a fellow soul to the sea in service of something larger than themselves. Then the submarine slipped beneath the waves and disappeared. The current did its work. By morning, a Spanish fisherman spotted the body floating near the shore. Within hours, Spanish naval officers had recovered the corpse and its waterlogged briefcase. The chain of custody unfolded exactly as British intelligence had predicted. Spanish authorities to local police, to naval intelligence, to Adolf Klaus. The German agent moved fast. He photographed every document and cabled Berlin immediately. Now came the most agonizing part of the operation: the waiting. In London, the architects of Mincemeat could do nothing but sit and hope. They had built their fiction with meticulous care: the love letters, the overdraft, the theatre stubs, the engagement ring receipt, every piece of pocket litter designed to make Major Martin breathe with authenticity. But would the Germans believe it? The answer came through Ultra, the top-secret program that allowed British intelligence to read encrypted German communications. At Bletchley Park, the codebreakers intercepted a message that made the Mincemeat team's hearts stop. German High Command had transmitted a signal to its commanders across the Mediterranean. The documents had been analysed. The conclusions had been drawn. The message read, "Mincemeat swallowed rod, line and sinker." The Germans had bought it. Every word, every forged signature, every carefully aged piece of paper. But that was only half the battle. The question now was whether Hitler himself would act on the intelligence. He did. On May 12, 1943, Hitler issued a personal directive that would reshape the entire Mediterranean theatre, reinforce Sardinia, strengthen the Peloponnese in Greece. The Führer was convinced that Sicily was a British feint, a distraction to mask the real invasion targets. Panzer divisions were redirected away from the island. The German commander in Sicily, who had correctly assessed that his island was the obvious target, was overruled by Berlin. When Winston Churchill received word of Hitler's troop movements, he was in Washington meeting with President Roosevelt. The Prime Minister sent a cable back to London, a message that has become legendary in intelligence circles. Just 3 words: "Mincemeat swallowed whole." The deception was complete. A dead man with a fabricated life had personally redirected the German war machine. When Allied forces stormed the beaches of Sicily on July 9th, they faced defences that had been deliberately weakened by Hitler's own hand. The casualties were far lighter than anyone had dared hope. Thousands of young men lived because German tanks were sitting in Greece, waiting for an invasion that would never come. The deception was a spectacular success. The invasion of Sicily went forward with far fewer casualties than feared. But the story doesn't end with a victory cable, because we still haven't answered the most important question. Who was the man who never was? The cable from Churchill confirmed the victory. The generals celebrated. But in a quiet corner of the intelligence world, one final secret remained classified. A debt owed to the silent, central actor in the entire affair. When the Allied invasion fleet approached Sicily on the night of July 9th, 1943, they found something remarkable. The beaches were defended, but not well defended. The Panzer divisions that should have been waiting to throw them back into the sea were in Greece, in Sardinia, anywhere but where they were needed. Operation Husky became the most successful amphibious assault in history up to that point. 160,000 Allied troops landed in the first 3 days. The casualty figures tell the story of what Mincemeat achieved. Military planners had estimated that a fully defended Sicily could cost the Allies upwards of 10,000 dead in the first week alone. The actual number was a fraction of that. Every soldier who walked off those beaches alive, every young man who returned home to marry, to have children, to live a full life, owed a debt to a dead man floating in Spanish waters 2 months earlier. The deception didn't just save lives on the beaches, it accelerated the entire Italian campaign. Mussolini fell from power within 2 weeks of the invasion. Italy surrendered 6 weeks later. The soft underbelly of Europe was exposed. And Adolf Hitler, the man who had personally ordered his forces to the wrong locations, never fully trusted his own intelligence services again. But here's what the victory parades never mentioned. Here's what remained classified for over 50 years. Major William Martin never existed. The love letters from Pam. The angry note from the bank manager. The photograph of a fiancée he would never marry. The proud, stiff letters from a father who never wrote them. All of it was fiction. Brilliant, meticulous, heartbreaking fiction crafted by intelligence officers who understood that the most powerful lies are wrapped in the truth of human emotion. Strip away the uniform, strip away the identity card, the theatre tickets, the engagement ring receipt. Strip away Major William Martin of the Royal Marines, and what remains? A body, just a body. A body that had a name once, though not the one carved into his Spanish headstone. His real name was Glyndwr Michael. He was Welsh, born in Aberbargode, a small mining town in the valleys of South Wales. His father was a coal miner who died when Glyndwr was 15. His mother followed not long after. By the time he reached adulthood, Glyndwr Michael had nothing. No family, no prospects, no home. He drifted to London, where he lived on the streets, one of thousands of invisible men haunting the margins of a city consumed by war. On January 24, 1943, Glyndwr Michael was found in an abandoned warehouse near King's Cross Station. He was barely alive. He had ingested rat poison, phosphorus-based, the kind that was everywhere in wartime London. Whether it was suicide or accident, no one knows for certain. The coroner's report was deliberately vague. What mattered to British intelligence was simpler. He was dead. He had no family to object. And phosphorus poisoning leaves the lungs filled with fluid, which meant his body would pass a cursory autopsy as a drowning victim. He was perfect. The men who selected him, Ewan Montague and Charles Cholmondeley, understood what they were doing. They were taking a man who had died with nothing, who had mattered to no one, whose passing would go unnoticed by the world. And they were giving him the most consequential death in modern military history. They dressed him in the uniform of an officer. They filled his pockets with the debris of a life he never lived. They invented for him a father who loved him, a woman who wanted to marry him, friends who would miss him. They gave a forgotten man a story, and then they used that story to save thousands of lives. This is the moral calculus of intelligence work, the mathematics of necessity. Glyndwr Michael gave no consent. He was not a volunteer. He was a homeless man who died alone, his body claimed by the state because there was no one else to claim it. The official file referred to him only as the body, never by name. Even the officers who handled his corpse, who dressed him and documented him and lowered him into the sea off the Spanish coast, didn't know who he really was. For 53 years, the British government kept his identity classified. Even when Ewan Montague wrote his book about the operation in 1953, he used a false name. The official story was that they were protecting intelligence methods. Perhaps they were also protecting themselves from an uncomfortable question. What does it mean to use a human being, without consent, as a weapon of war? In 1998, the British government finally acknowledged the truth, and in Huelva, Spain, where Major William Martin had been buried with full military honours by the Spanish Navy, a new inscription was added to his headstone. It reads, Glyndwr Michael served as Major William Martin. He has two names now, two identities, the fiction that changed history and the forgotten man who made it possible. Operation Mincemeat is remembered as the perfect deception, a plan that saved thousands of lives. But it was built on the anonymous sacrifice of one man who had nothing, and in death gave everything. It leaves us with a final chilling question. What is the true price of a perfect lie?